Louise here again, one half of the Ailene Lynn Ray writing team and your pajama archivist for Ailene's Arcane Archive. Today we are going to do some steampunk, which I'm excited about. So, Fantasy Steampunk series that is by Kim McDougall. And so it's called A Knack for Metal and Bone. Book 1 is A Knack for Metal and Bone. And this is... I really enjoyed this book, or both books that are out so far. So again, somehow I managed to pick up a series of books that isn't quite finished yet, but the next one is on its way. And both of these are very good. And they don't leave you hanging, which is nice. So you can read both the first one and the second one and feel like you're not just tearing your hair out because it hasn't been finished yet. So while there's still left some things hanging, it doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger, which is nice. So let us take a look at A Knack for Metal and Bone. A royal tinker and a rogue soldier must unite to stop the monsters threatening their city and unravel the secrets lurking within it. Rowan doesn't just work with machines. She hears them. The hum of engines, the whisper of gears and wires, they speak to her through the magic that flows from her mech hand. Whether she's fine-tuning the colossal automaton that protects New Torwood City or toiling in her workshop, being a mechanic is the only life she truly enjoys. But the Regent's Council wants more. They demand a princess who will embrace the pomp and ceremony of royal duty, not a tinker with oil-stained hands. When she's unexpectedly recruited into Ranger Squad 54 for a mission deep into the wild meadows, Rowan leaps at the chance. Finally, a way to serve her city and put her unique talents to use, far from the glittering halls of royalty. Connell, an ex-commander, knows the dangers of the meadows firsthand. Discharged from the Rangers when his inner wolf broke free during battle, he now makes a living running rare artifacts between New Torwood and the southern cities. But the Rangers have a new mission for him, one that could clear his tarnished record. A group of international scientists has vanished, and recovering them is critical for the future of New Torwood. Failure could push the city into a war it cannot afford. Thrown together on a high-risk mission, Rowan, Connell, and the Rangers of Squad 54 will face unimaginable dangers in the wilderness and uncover dark secrets that could shake the foundations of the city they've sworn to protect. But the real menace might be at the heart of New Torwood itself. Now, Kim McDougall has another series that is out already, the Valkyrie Bestiary series, which I have not read. If it is anything close to how good this series of books is, then I think I may go ahead and look into that as well. So let's jump into a little fantasy steampunk here, which is everything that you love about steampunk, really, because the world that has been built through this book and the way things work is very cool. So, find your comfy space and your beverage of choice. And let's sit back and let me tell you a story. A Knack for Metal and Bone by Kim McDougall. Chapter 1, A Knack for Obfuscation. From a crack of an alley between 3-story townhouses, Connell watched. His buyer lived in the home across the road, but he wasn't going anywhere near it until he was certain that nobody was watching him watch the house. It isn't paranoia if they're really out to get you. The neighborhood was clean and quiet, exactly the kind of place where you'd expect someone who collected priceless mechs to live. And it just so happened that he had a priceless piece of mech prancing on his shoulder right now. The metal lizard let out a stuttering ka-ka-ka, and Connell poked it until it settled down. After a month on the road together, he'd become used to its odd noises and jerky movements. The damn thing had no off button and no Thera-chip that he could find to deactivate it. It had no discernible power source of any kind because it wasn't just a mech, it was a pneuma mech. Crafted by the legendary Harry Hightower, a mech mage who was long dead but whose artifacts lingered on. Pneuma was an archaic word that literally translated to that which is breathed. The lizard was a creation of metal and heart, something that thousands of standard mechs working in the streets and homes of New Torwood could never boast. Some collectors even believed the Pneumas had souls. Connell didn't know if they were wise or foolish in this assumption. He only knew that he couldn't turn the saint's damn thing off, and when he tried to stuff it in his pack, it made an even bigger racket. Better to endure the pinch of its claws on his shoulder and hope it would stay quiet. One of the lizard's back legs ended in a broken stub, but apart from that, it was a striking piece of mech art. With an undulating body of copper or brass rings, a dog-like face with a sharp brass muzzle, and green gems for eyes, its reticulated tail wrapped around Connell's neck, and the metal coil was a comfortable weight. Every inch of it was etched with filigree lines that were both beautiful and practical, as they represented a language of magic that only a master mech mage could understand. Dr. Renata had paid Connell twice his normal fee to find this Pneuma in the southern city of Dowchester and bring it to New Torwood, or at least her agent had paid him half as a goodwill deposit. The lizard had been a difficult treasure to find, and the journey north had nearly killed him twice. He'd been following the river and was caught in a spring flood. Then, only a week ago, as he neared the city, a lone gaunt had found him while he slept. Only his wolf instincts had saved him that time. But tonight Connell would collect the rest of his fee, and all the hardship would be worth it. The money would keep him in provisions for a year. That meant a whole year before he had to venture into the city to take on another job. He rubbed a finger along the lizard's head, and it leaned into his touch. Part of him, a very small part, would be sorry to see it go. The lizard seemed to watch the world with curiosity, and he could almost believe the wild stories about Harry Hightower creations. And then the lizard would stutter and flail its metal tail, and he would dismiss the idea as foolish and fantastical. Certainly Dr. Renata thought the lizard was special. He just hoped she knew about the stutter and the broken leg. He was paid to track it down, not to fix it. Connell continued to study the doctor's house. At this time of year, the estival sun filled the city with a weak but inexhaustible light for 21 hours a day, and it dropped deep shadows into the street between the 3-story homes. A dark figure skittered along those shadows. Connell pulled back into the safety of the alley. The figure was too small to be an adult human, so either a child or an elf. It used the shadows like a pro, creeping from window to window on silent feet, then stopping at the doctor's house to check the ground floor latches. They were secure, and the would-be thief moved on. The street fell still again. Connell waited and watched. His wolf made his restlessness known, like an itch under his skin. Garou understood waiting, but he didn't like being confined inside the city. "There are monsters in the meadows," Connell told the wolf. "There are worse matters here," Garou said, "and it stinks." Connell couldn't argue with that. Even here in Hightown, the odor was oppressive to his sensitive nose. It smelled of rot and sweat and excrement, the sense of too many people too closely confined. "Let us be done with human business and run free, brother." Garou pushed a little with his power to remind Connell that he could force a shift whenever he wanted. It was an empty threat, brought on by boredom more than anger or agitation. Garou had only forced a shift on him once, and they were both still paying for that transgression. Connell glanced over the rooftops. 1 block to the north, stone merlons of a massive wall were silhouetted against the darkening sky. The wall was an amazing feat of engineering that circled New Torwood City to keep out monsters that roamed the meadows. Above the wall's peak, a copper dome glinted in the dull sunlight as Talos lurched by. Only the top of his head and eyes were visible above the stone. Twice a day, the giant mech circled the city with slow, grinding steps. He was a better timekeeper than the summer sun. If Talos was rounding the northern edge of town, that meant it was almost midnight. The sun would soon dip below the horizon. It never got truly dark this far north, but dusk would turn the world flat and gray and make hiding much easier. He waited. There was no drawn-out sunset. The city was simply plunged into shadow as if a god had dropped a blanket over his favorite pet's cage. It was time. Connell gathered his magic about him like a cloak of shadows and pushed away from the alley. His knack was a minor talent of obfuscation, not disguise really, or even camouflage, just the ability to be ignored when he wanted it. A useful bit of magic when the senior city keepers could still recognize him as a traitor and a deserter. He crossed the road. The lizard mech chittered in his ear. He poked it. The damn thing needed to stay quiet a while longer. He wasn't planning on announcing his arrival. Standing on the front stoop of the doctor's house, he examined the door. It had the sturdy lock of someone with wealth to protect, his favorite kind. From his pack he pulled out a mech shaped like a feather with fine metal barbs on each side. He slid it into the keyhole and pressed the button on the handle. It made a faint whirring sound as the barbs extended to fit the keyhole. He turned it and the tumbler clicked. Here's hoping the doc isn't mistrustful enough for a deadbolt too. He pushed and the door opened a crack. Excellent. He took a moment to put away the lockpick and listened for a shuffle of feet. Nothing. The doctor was an elderly widow, according to his sources. She slept alone and kept minimal staff. Even the butler would be asleep at this hour. He slipped inside. Curtains covered the windows, but the fading light found chinks in that armor. Garou snorted at the closed, musty smell of the place. Connell crept across the foyer to the grand staircase and stole up the stairs, touching nothing. Halfway up, a board creaked. He froze and tightened his knack around him. 1 heartbeat, 2 heartbeats. 10 heartbeats later, the house was still silent. He crept on. It would have been easier to make an appointment to meet Dr. Renata during normal business hours, but then she could have alerted city guards and had them waiting when he arrived. No, it was better to meet on his terms. She'd get her precious mech. He'd get his money, and the keepers would still be out one traitor. He'd slip away from the city before anyone knew he'd been there. In the upper hall, only one room had double doors. It had to be the master bedroom. The door opened on well-oiled hinges. That was the nice thing about breaking into stately homes. They were always free of clutter, dust, and rusty hinges. The doctor's bedroom was darker than the hall. The windows were shuttered and heavily shrouded. He shut the door anyway and paused with his back to it until his eyes adjusted. The room was steeped in a heavy perfume that, to his wolf senses, smelled like flowers left to rot in a vase. Ticking and clicking sounds came from all around. The wolf growled at the back of his mind until Connell's night eyes adjusted to the gloom. Mechs filled every surface of the room. Clocks and perpetual motion machines, birds, dogs, and cats with glowing gemstone eyes, vehicles with spinning wheels, even a humanoid automaton whose head stuttered left and right with a quirky tick. Creepy as fuck. Garou whined in agreement. A rustle of bedsheets confirmed his mark was in her bed. The mech lizard plucked at his vest with sharp claws. Connell stepped forward. A plush rug muffled his footsteps. 2 feet from the end of the bedclothes rasped, and a small voice said, "Who's there?" Connell paused. He meant to wake her, but now that he had, she sounded frail and lost. "I can see you." Her voice cut through the darkness like a whip. "Okay, maybe not so frail." "I brought your mech." "Commander West." It wasn't a question. She shifted in the bed. He heard the flick of a theralighter, and the bedside lamp came on, filling the room with purple light. Dr. Renata sat up in a bed of silk linens and overstuffed pillows. Her dark hair, shot through with gray, was loose around her shoulders. The color of her eyes was lost in the dim light, but they bored into him. "Not Commander," he said. "Not anymore. Just Connell." "I expected you tomorrow, at my office." She didn't seem surprised to see him, and that made his skin prickle as if fur were about to burst from his pores. Inside his cage of flesh, the wolf howled a warning. "I'm sorry. I don't like hospitals." He tried to smile, but was aware his smile was too feral to be reassuring. He didn't like this. Not at all. Dr. Renata watched him with a frown, and her tone reminded him of his old school mistress after he'd been caught stealing test sheets. The lizard mech opened its mouth. "Caw!" Dr. Renata sucked in a breath. "Is that it? Let me see." She swung her legs over the edge of the bed and landed on bare feet. A long blue nightdress covered her from chin to ankles. She crossed the space between them and stood before him without fear, despite the fact that he was a strange man dressed in hunting leathers that had breached the sanctity of her bedroom in the middle of the night. Dr. Renata had eyes only for the mech. Something was very wrong. Connell stared at her outstretched hand. He'd lived too long in the meadows where silence and stillness meant a predator was nearby, but she was just a tiny woman. He was the one with the power here. "Payment first." His voice sounded like he'd been chewing on charcoal. He hadn't spoken to another human in weeks. "Of course." She took a few steps back to claim the pouch of coins from the bedside table and handed it to him. His fist closed over the pouch. "She had the payment ready," Garou whined. Connell wanted to run from the house. The wolf wanted him to keep running until they left the city far behind. "It's a big sum, but worth it." She plucked the mech lizard from his shoulder. The long tail scraped his neck as she drew it away. "Not that you'll get the chance to spend it." Oh well, perhaps the magistrate will donate your effects to the orphans. She was turning away, gazing at her prized mech. Donate? Shit. His wolf had already bypassed slower human reactions and urged his feet toward freedom when the dressing room door banged open and 3 guards rushed out. From years of battling gaunts during the uprising, Connell and Garou had perfected a technique to blend their abilities. Connell had strength, agility, and the long reach of human arms. Garou's heightened senses made him preternaturally aware of his surroundings. They put all those talents to use as the guards tried to grab him. He ducked under the first guard's clumsy attempt, and by the time he'd spun to face the next, he'd unsheathed his air blades. The blades had cost him a small fortune. They were titanium, with handles custom-made to fit his grip. A runnel ran along each flat edge, where therachips could be fitted to ignite the mech mage runes that were etched into the metal. A sharp whipping motion of both wrists ignited the therachips, and the blades hummed in his hands. The magic caused a thin layer of air to heat and vibrate around the knives. The vibrations were inhumanly fast and let the blades tear through flesh, bone, and sinew like they were gossamer. The guard had a longer sword, but it was only steel, and when he hit an air blade, the recoil sent him sprawling with a cry of pain. The bedroom door slammed shut, and Connell whirled to face the next opponent. This man was taller, broader in the chest, and had scars of a seasoned soldier. I know you. He pointed the tip of his blade at Connell's chest. You're that traitor that killed his own general. They'll hang you. He spat, but it was more for an effect as only a tiny spray hit the ground in front of Connell. I'll thank you not to dirty my floors like that. The old doctor sounded cross, but not scared. Both men ignored her. Connell circled the big man, keeping the others in his sight. One was down. The other waited for his chance to wade into the fight. Dr. Renata watched from the safety of the far side of the bed, her precious mech clutched in her hands. You weren't at the Battle of Algid Pass, were you? Connell asked. He feinted left, trying to see if the big man would fall for the ruse and open himself up to a fatal jab. He didn't. I was not. The guard puffed out his chest. I fought on the Eastern Front with the 43rd. What does it matter? Connell lunged again, jabbing, feinting, looking for weakness in this behemoth of a man. Because if you'd been at Algid Pass, you'd be thanking me for killing General Naylor, not trying to skewer me. Doubtful. The guard grinned, displaying an impressive array of blackened and broken teeth. Connell could see there was no way out of this fight. The third guard was rousing. He could never beat back all of them and make an escape. Release me, brother. I will tear out their throats, and I can run faster than any man. Connell was seriously considering this tactic when a bolt hit him in the shoulder. He looked up to see Dr. Renata holding an antique railgun. Her lips were pressed in a grim line, but there was merriment in her eyes. He looked down at the dart protruding from his shoulder. It shot me, was what he tried to say, but it came out in a slurred garble. His fingers went numb, and he dropped his blades. The wolf howled, but he sounded very far away. Connell's knees buckled, and he crumpled to the ground. The last thing he heard was the ka-ka-ka of the mech lizard. And there you go. Chapter 1 of A Knack for Metal and Bone by Kim McDougall. As you notice, there is some language in this book. There is also a little bit of romance, but it is definitely not a romance. It is at its heart, a kind of post-apocalyptic steampunk fantasy. I encourage you to look at the details below and get a copy of this for yourself if you like steampunk fantasy. I think you will really enjoy this series of books. And if you like what you see and hear, we invite you to like and subscribe to Aileen's Arcane Archive. That would help us out a lot. So thank you for being here with us today. I thank you for your time, and I hope that your day goes well. And as always, your life is a story, so go out and live it.